Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Logan. I am Programme Director from BuildForce, reporting to you from a very glorious sunny afternoon. So I'm really looking forward to that lunchtime run because it's not in the rain and it makes a change. So today we are delighted to have with us two of our veterans who are going to talk to you about data centres. So it's going to be a fantastic session. I'm looking forward to learning some stuff myself. So sit back and enjoy. I give you Angela.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Angela Forbes, the Chief Exec of BuildForce. So welcome and thank you for dialing into our schedule of virtual career chats. Now, in terms of a construction look ahead for 2025, it's healthy. We have commercial fit out looking up, infrastructure is ticking along nicely, and house building should be on the turn. However, data centres have been going great guns, and with a healthy demand and pipeline, it's looking to continue in that trajectory. So here to discuss this space further and their roles within it, we welcome two veterans, Tom Cheeseborough, Manager of Design Integration with Vantage, and Michael Lewin, Director of Operations at Pure. So I'll hand over to Tom. We'll switch our cameras off, Tom. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Angela. Right, and I'll kick off. I've got the challenge of setting the scene of what the data center sector is a little bit as well, and then I'll talk to you about my experience. I've been given the brief to make this as broad as possible, whilst giving people some insights to how I got to where I am now, mostly for recording's sake and people being able to look back at this over a little while. So I will try and meet that brief. Yeah, I work for Vantage Data Centers. We're in the hyperscale data center market. Corporate office based in London. It's actually, I think, about 100 meters around the corner from Pure DC's office in Farringdon. So next door neighbors. But what are data centers? I think there was a stat came out that only 50% of the UK adult population knew what a data center was, despite everybody having a smartphone or several and laptops and all the rest of it. The data centers are, in the simplest terms, where the internet lives. But in our terms, in construction terms, they are secure, resilient communication facilities. They are warehouses with complex power and cooling infrastructure with a strong, resilient fiber connection, or several, where data companies are able to house their computing and their storage services. They are now in the UK classed as critical national infrastructure, and they gain the protection it deserves because all organizations will be using data centers in some way, unless you are quite literally living in the Stone Age and don't have any IT whatsoever. Businesses, individuals, governments, armies, everybody uses data centers in some form. And what is happening inside the data center, it depends on the type, it depends on the owner, the occupier, and the people who are fitting out the IT. But everything from cloud computing, running applications, e-commerce, social media, and of course AI, which is on everybody's talking points at the moment. Both the training and the inference of AI algorithms happens in data centers around the world. And that is in large part fueling the next part of the boom. The last 10 years has been about building out for e-commerce and cloud computing. The next 10 years is expected to be all about AI. Where the 10 years after that go, I don't know. Place your bets here, but it's certainly a huge growth industry based on all of these Internet of Things that it just keeps on growing. So a little bit about the sector as a whole. This is just a representation. This is a very short extract of names that I've put against each of these to try and give you as broad an idea as possible of who works in what space. And there is definitely opportunity for veterans in all of these areas. So starting, I suppose, at the top, or at least at the top of the pyramid as I've drawn it, you have what we call the hyperscalers. These are your massive tech companies. These are people who are filling out entire data centers themselves. Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Oracle, and the like. There are some others in maybe a second tier of hyperscaler as well, and there are people who are building out particular AI designed data centers companies you may not have heard of who are trying to sell GPUs by the slice, by the hour, and making good money doing it. So there's lots of people who are the end user. You'll also find in maybe on the bridge between 1 and 2 here, enterprise data centers. So large banks run their own data centers largely, for example, and big commercial institutions as well. Next in the tier, you've got owners, operators, and developers. Vantage and Pure both fit into this space. We are, or I'll speak for Vantage, essentially a real estate business. We buy land, we build data centers, and we lease those data centers. Equinix, as an example, buy land, build data centers, and they will rent you a rack space, so a piece of warehouse about the size of a fridge, where you can put your data rack in there if you want to. CBRE have got a variety of options. Vantage, however, are purely hyperscale now. So we only sell entire rooms or entire buildings, or lease entire buildings to people in the tier 1 category of this sector diagram. I'll let Michael explain where Pure fit into this, but you also have co-location, which is what I just explained Equinix do, where they build out the building and you can buy individual rack spaces or rows or any multiple of that. And you have enterprise data centers, which is owned by the company that runs it. So if you're ING, the Dutch bank, or you're Barclays, you'll have a data center somewhere, almost certainly run by yourself, for yourself. So lots of different companies you can get into depending on your skill set. In column 3, we've got general contractors. These are generally not the same tier 1 contractors you'd see on other BuildForce talks and sessions, insight days. But there are some overlap. Mason, AECOM are 2 that spring to mind, but there's another tier of data center specialist general contractors. Design consultants, these are very well known. A lot of the biggest consultants in the UK, Europe, and the US are now branching out with data center design teams. So anyone who's looked at the military MOD advisory side of these consultancies, they will probably have a DC team now to varying degrees and specialties. And then at the bottom, you've got equipment vendors. So those people who've got a particular MEP background, REME, for example, all of these people who are making generators and UPS and battery systems and chillers and computer room air handlers, all of that stuff. So there's a full value chain that is blowing up in the data center sector. What kind of jobs are there, particularly for veterans, ex-service people, families, spouses? Of course, there's construction. I'm in that part of the Vantage development business, and that includes buying land, surveying land, building the data center, project managing the building of the data center, engineering, design management, health and safety, project control, so cost management, scheduling, anything that goes into building a very large and moderately expensive building, particularly with an MEP focus. So if you're a mechanical or electrical engineer, or anywhere on that spectrum, then there's definitely going to be jobs somewhere out there for you. Linking back to the supply chain. So Vantage don't build directly ourselves. We have general contractors and design consultants, and we are what we would call a client-side organization. I'm going to come back to that at the end. But any manner of construction jobs that you can imagine definitely applies to the data center sector. Now, once you've built the thing, someone has to maintain it, and that is maintaining the security systems, the cooling, the power, and just the general maintenance of the facility. So plenty of roles there, lots of roles for people with technical backgrounds from anywhere in the services, Air Force, Navy, RAF, all families and above, and reservists, of course. So lots of roles there in the technical trades that I would encourage people to look at. And I'll come back to another top tip on how to apply for jobs like that as well. And then the last one is possibly more niche. Not many ex-service people will have a particular IT or comms background, but for example, 90 Signals Unit, the RAF, or the Royal Signals from the Army, if you want to keep in with IT and communications. Then, of course, there's the people who come along and actually pull the cables and fit the data racks. Vantage as an owner-operator don't do that. So we don't have any of those roles in the third box, but the hyperscalers do, enterprise companies do. So quickly on to my career. I went to Sandhurst in 2011. I did the Royal Engineers Troop Commanders course. I was a troop commander for 2 years. I was a battle group engineer for 2 years in Germany, in Paderborn. And I was a regimental ops officer in Chatham in a training regiment. I then went on to what we call the Professional Engineer Training Course, which is a 2-year course. You start off in Chatham studying an MSc in engineering design, and then you have workplace placements in industry. I spent a year with Sir Robert McAlpine building out a Deutsche Bank headquarters in the city in Moorgate, if anyone knows that part of London, and then spent 9 months or so with Wentworth House Partnership. They are a specialist design consultancy focusing on geotechnical design and temporary works. While I was there, I was the lead temporary works engineer for 8 Bishopsgate, which is a 50-storey tower block, again in the City of London. So a broad technical experience there. Went through and got the master's degree awarded and chartership with the Civil Engineers, Institution of Civil Engineers. I then went back into Green Kit, various staff jobs, staff college, did a job at PGHQ working on the evacuation from Afghanistan, spent some time with NATO Mission Iraq in Baghdad as their infrastructure requirements director, and then spent 2 years focused on the Middle East, including a tour as program manager type level across various different projects for the UK operational infrastructure across the Middle East region, whilst I was commanding a specialist team, Royal Engineers. That was my subunit command post. I left the Army last summer, 2024, joined Vantage in August, and am now manager of the design integration team for the EMEA region. So that's Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Possibly the interesting part for you guys, so how I got from being a subunit commander to where I am now. I cast my net fairly wide initially. Being an STRE commander is lots of things. It's not really a specialist. It's what the Army calls specialist engineering. It's what industry calls very much generalist engineering and engineering management. I first thought I wanted to be in consultancy. Went and looked at companies like Jacobs, Mace, AWE directly, Turner & Townsend, Atkins, Realis, lots of generic project management and consultancy roles. I'm sure I could have got a job at one of those. I decided it probably wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I started looking abroad. I looked a lot at moving to the Middle East, similar companies, but in a different setup and a different role, more on project controls, project advisory, being on site and managing contractors directly, but being that one step removed from actually being a contractor. I also looked to see control risks on there. I also looked at security design and security engineering. Overall, that wasn't really what I wanted to be doing either. But talking to people out there led me to looking at Big Four consultancy roles, and so advising on infrastructure development, requirement setting, all of those sorts of things as a consultant. So I looked back in the UK at Big Four and BCG and people like that, McKinsey. Had a couple of job offers there. Thought that was going to go okay, but in the background to all of this, I'd been networking with people in the data center sector and got a job offer from Vantage for the job I'm doing now. It came down to being the right fit for me. It's the right blend of travel and not travel. It's the right blend of engineering, but not being too specialist. And I'm going to talk about client side in a second if I have time. And it's a huge growth industry. So rather than scratching around or getting absolutely thrashed at a real asset consultancy that doesn't go anywhere and your time is sold out, essentially, that's what consultants do. I'm in a team that is focused on delivering results for the company. I like that. I'm in a fairly free role to go and find where improvements can be made in the company. And it worked out as really being the best fit. But I went through looking at all of the 3 C's before I ended up there. What I do, it's a bit of a niche role in that I'm probably the least technical engineer in the engineering team. I'm a civil engineer in what is a very mechanical and electrical heavy sector, really. And the four balls on the left there show the responsibilities of my team. I've got main electrical and mechanical equipment, so very large generators, chillers, low voltage switchgear, transformers, or high voltage transformers. All of that comes under MEP equipment. Sustainability and design runs from my team, digital information systems and innovation, and design strategy, which is turning Vantage's product into something that we can set on a site and sell. There are overlaps within all of those. There are themes, but I sit in the middle and bring all of those together as what I suppose in the army would be called a force multiplier, or an enabling function. We take everything that Vantage knows at a global level and translate it into something that can be built on a project site, and we've got 30 or so live projects. What I do day to day, improvements and optimization is my main focus. So that's driving my team to improve on the way we do processes, how we turn our product into a better project, how we save money. I spend a fair bit of time managing my team because I'm not a specialist. They do their jobs better than I could ever do their jobs. And so I spend a lot of time managing, helping, enabling, removing blockers, whichever form of project management talk you like. And then I do stakeholder engagement. So I look out from the engineering team across the business and sell what engineering does and bring people in with their own improvements, their own complaints, their own enhancements. I've been asked to mention qualifications. I did reasonably well out of the army in terms of qualifications. You absolutely don't need to have all the same letters after your name that I could use if I wanted to. The top row there, my bachelor's in engineering, my MSc in engineering, my chartership, those are what I need to do this job. The fellowship of the ICA I only got after I'd successfully applied for this job, so that certainly isn't required, but is now what I would say is my baseline brand, those top ones. I'm also a fellow of the Royal Engineers own institution, which I will keep up for the crossover between civilian and military life. I have an MA in security studies, which is totally irrelevant, and I'm a member of the Association for Project Management, which I will also keep up and probably look to develop at some point with further qualifications. All of the stuff in the bottom, project management qualification, managing successful programs, management of risk, and Print 2, I would say not relevant. Relevant for my experience, relevant to say I've got them, they are on my CV. Nobody asked me about it. I don't think anybody ever will ask you about it. And if you ever go to a company that wants you to have one of those, then they will probably pay for you to go and do it. And the bottom one is certified data center design practitioner, only relevant if you're in a DC company and if they want you to go and do it. Really useful, really interesting, but not something I recommend you spend your resettlement money on unless you are absolutely dead set on going into data centers. So I'm probably at time now, but my top tips, if I can, Angela, is firstly the 3 C's. If you're looking at going into the construction realm, consider, do you want to be in contracting? Do you want to be in consulting? Or do you want to be client side? And FM I'll throw in there as well. It slightly falls out with those 3 C's and doesn't really roll off the tongue as well, but there's a big FM strand as well. I thought I wanted to be in consulting. I ended up realizing I wanted to be client side, and I'm very happy with that decision. The second point is speak the lingo. I think some of you will have heard the saying, dress for the job you want, not the job you've got. So I think it's quite important to decide where you want to be, try and pick up some of the language for that, and then you can use that language in your networking, you can use it in interviews. For example, instead of saying, I was the leading mechanic on a nuclear submarine, you'll say you were a highly responsible critical facilities technician operating under high stress situations 24/7 and responsible for X, Y, and Z critical systems on your ship. That, or boat, if I use the submarine example, that is the language of data centers. that is what a non-military person in a recruiting chain will understand. And then you can link it back to how busy and important that job actually is. And then the bottom one is networking. Everyone talks about networking all the time. It is really important. It is how I got this job, but it links into the top two. By networking and casting your net really wide at the start, you'll be able to ask questions and narrow down what you really want to be doing. And by having those conversations with people, you'll pick up on the language of the sector you want to end up in. And those three ideas hopefully support each other. And Angela, that's all I've got for slides, and I look forward to questions later.
That was perfect. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. We'll pass over to Michael.
There we go. I'm now talking. So they were pleased to hear, for those on the other end, I haven't prepared slides because I knew Tom was going to do such an excellent job. So I don't intend to go back over some of that, but what I will do is very quickly qualify what my business does and my role within the business and how I got from there to here. And then I'll just talk around a little bit, a couple of the points that will hopefully stimulate some questions. So I spent 25 years in the Army. I retired in 2019 as a senior lieutenant colonel. And again, casting my net far and wide, I assumed I was going to go into consultancy. Having worked in Abbey Wood in the past, down in Bristol, I assumed that I'd end up back in there. And indeed, the first two jobs I got offered, one was with Jacobs, one was with Turner and Townsend. I ended up working for a company called CACI, but nonetheless, as a soft landing after having been indoctrinated in the military, I ended up consulting back into defence in both Abbey Wood in procurement and also up in London in a number of government departments. Very interesting, very exciting, and it was quite interesting to see how the same opinions that you had in uniform counted more because you were a consultant. So that's quite funny. So if you're sat there and slightly frustrated and you think I can make a bigger difference, you can pretty much go back into the same organization but in a suit, and your opinion will be listened to more, which is particularly frustrating. After a year, 18 months, I decided, you know what, yes, it was a nice soft landing, but it wasn't for me. And I still didn't really know what to do. And certainly the experience speaking to my friends and other people that I've come across who've served in the military is the first job you get is not necessarily the job that you keep. So I actually cast my net very far and wide. And on the back of that, a recruitment agency came to me asking me to apply for a job that I'd never heard of in an industry that I knew nothing about. So I was run for a job to be something called a mobilization manager in the data center industry. And again, to me, data centers were, things that other people saw on movies. And a mobilization manager, if you imagine, as Tom was talking about the construction side of the business, once the thing's built, then it needs to be operated. So in order to get it operating, you need everything and everyone in place. So if any of you have been involved in any sort of planning for operations, or you understand how the TAM works, the old tactical aid memoir, then you can quite frankly be a mobilization manager. So effectively, it was pulling everything together to make sure that on day one of live operations, we as a business could operate. So I ended up working for Pure Data Centers. Pure is younger than Vantage. We've only been around now for, live operations for 4 years. And we're still growing quite rapidly. We are, according to Tom's definition, so I don't muck it around, we are an owner-operator developer. So we build and operate the data centers on behalf of hyperscale customers. So again, Tom on his, if you remember, on what was a hyperscaler. So the household names that you'll have heard of are, so customers for all of us providers in this space are the likes of Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Facebook and Oracle and some household names and others that you'll never have heard of. So after having spent 18 months as the mobilization manager, the opportunity came about to be considered to become the operations director. So I now sit at the top of operations, and I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations for Tom's definition, on the facility management side of all of our sites. So I currently have data centers on 3 continents. I employ several hundred people. And our job is to make sure that the lights, literally the lights are kept on, and that my customers who actually run the data halls within inside our facilities, we control the environment for them. So we control the heating, the lighting, the power, the cooling, the chilling, and we guarantee that 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year without interruption. And the differentiation between some providers and others are the guarantee of availability. So we are constantly running with multiple levels of redundancy and multiple levels of availability. So at all times, we provide a service to the customer, and that's all we do. So whilst Tom obviously focused upon construction, and I can talk about that, the reality is that I'm more about the facilities management. So in my space, I tend to employ mechanical engineers, primarily maintaining generators, and some of the mechanical services on site, quite a bit of electrical and chilling engineering. So these are the people that either look after the fairly high voltage electrical systems and indeed the chiller systems on the roof to make sure we control the environment. I also employ an awful lot of security. So we have an awful lot of people who, basically secure the sites. And again, if ever, knowing what we know, as Tom will tell you, it's not like the movies. You can't just break into a data center. Trust me, I've worked in government departments which are less secure than my data centers. And then on top of that, there's lots of other roles within our business that are standard. So I have office managers. We, bizarrely, and I don't know how this happened, I've got a para or an ex-para who's a lawyer. So, we've got all the classic lawyers, accountants, anything you can think of in any business, data centers have as well. Interestingly, Tom talked about qualifications, and he clearly focused upon his area of expertise. I spoke to my recruiter and asked him to give me a bit of a feel, and I've offered the team to share the list that he generated for me. But on the maintenance side, on the facilities management, I'm looking for sort of either HND or equivalent for the maintainers, a national certificate in electrical or mechanical engineering, any knowledge on business management systems. What else am I after? From a security side, ideally people that are Security Industry Association licensed to come into roles. And in the project management side, and I appreciate Tom said he doesn't need Prince 2. Well, for my project managers, we do, but that's only a gateway access. In other words, what do you need the qualifications for is to get the interview. Whether you use the Prince 2 subsequently, you'll use the principles, but not in detail. But again, ideally, if you've got knowledge of Primavera P6 or Power BI knowledge, or if you can talk about risk registers, costs, benefits, that's fine. And likewise, all of in fact, our health and safety director and all of our health and safety site people are all ex-Royal Engineers or have come from a military background. So again, they talk about having a NEBOSH certificate, an IEMA certificate, don't know what that is, and experience in ISOs 18,001, 27,000. There's a whole bunch of them out there. I could talk about the IT ones, and I'm happy to answer questions should people want. I think the key thing from Tom is to get rid of the jingo in the CVs. As a business, anyone who applies for a job within Pure, who's an ex-military person, gets a guaranteed interview with me. Why do we do that? Because CVs from ex-military people are generally awful, and you undersell yourself. So actually, I can cut through that and go, do you know what? You're actually much better than you're selling yourself. But also, I'll do a hot debrief at the end for people that are rubbish, and say, do you know what? You've oversold yourself. And indeed, the great danger with us is we can all tell a good story, is to make sure that you don't lie in your CV, because you will be found out. So I think, rather than give any additional details, I think probably the question and answer session will add more value rather than me witter on about me. The only thing, some of you observant will note I've changed my background. So again, there's lots and lots of innovation going on within the data center industry, from the design side, from the operation side, that we're always, there's an awful lot of money in data centers, and we're always trying to maximize the profits. The artist impression behind me is one of, what have I got? 5 data centers in build. I know Vantage have more. When complete, that's an image of one of my London data centers. It will have the world's biggest green wall running around the outside of it. which was in the news last week, certainly in London Evening Standard and a few other places. So there's a lot of good work going on. And, if you're looking to get into construction, trying to keep up with building versus demand is really difficult. Trying to get quality operators is really, really hard. So that's me on send. I don't know whether we're going to go into question and answers. Don't know.
Perfect, Michael. That was amazing. Thank you very much. I'll ask Tom to switch his camera on and join us. If you do have any questions, either write them in the box or raise your hand. We're more than happy to bring you online. Tom, you kicked us off today, so thank you very much for that. So a couple of quick questions to you just to warm you up. You mentioned about your placement year providing that amazing insights. Can I ask, what was your greatest learning during that time or most surprising insights?
Oh, that's a good one. The main learning point from that phase, I think, is managing subcontractors. I was working for a principal contractor, Sir Robert McAlpine, a brilliant company for those who don't end up in data centers, by the way. I really enjoyed working with them. But that was on site, that was counting rebar, checking concrete pours, slump tests, very much hands-on on site, seeing how things are built. And it's invaluable experience, really, to be in a job I'm in now. I've seen how it's done. I've seen some of the corners that people will try and cut. And so it's a real grounding in the basis of the construction industry, which I found really invaluable. And then likewise, spending some time with a design consultant, seeing how they make money. So you can see what questions they'll ask you and how to give them a scope that they can use and they can give you an answer properly. So having been on contracting, consulting and client side, I've got a not huge experience, but a good insight into each of those, which I find really valuable.
And just understanding where somebody's coming from is invaluable, isn't it? So sorry.
So if I can just answer that as well. So military personnel are really, really interesting. And we all think what we do is normal, but actually it really isn't. And so if you can get to the interview stage and you can explain what you've done with examples, I guarantee it'll be more interesting than any dullard who's come from the civilian world. Do not underestimate the value of turning up on time, being smartly dressed and applying yourself professionally in the way that you would in the military. That is a skill set which somehow a lot of people seem to have had a bypass, having not served in the military. And you cannot underestimate those really fundamental basics when going for jobs and retaining them as well.
That's a very good point, Michael, and this slobby dullard. Oh, yeah, a couple more questions if I can.
Don't take it personally.
You're spot on. Honestly, Michael, you are absolutely spot on. So you both mentioned, but I'll ask you first, Tom. You said during your transition, you looked in other spaces, including abroad, that weren't the right fits, and you were listening to your gut instinct during that time. Was it the people that put you off? Was it the role or the business, the lack of opportunity? What is it our service leavers should be looking for to know whether it's right for them or not?
So I think what brought me back client side was the problem solving focus, the being in a team. There's a term that does not apply to all consultancies, so would be unfair, but body shopping. There are some out there, I won't name names, but you're brought on as a consultant. You think you're going to work on a really big project with the team that you've interviewed with, and actually you're sent out as an individual project manager to work on somebody else's project. And we do employ project managers from some of these consultancies. And that's great if you want to move on to a new project every year, you don't mind traveling around the UK. There's some fantastic projects going on. Jacobs, for example, on the atomic weapons establishment, huge growth there. I'm sure you talk to them a lot. Really interesting jobs. But I wanted to be in the company that I was going to work for. I wanted to be in the team that I interviewed with, and I wanted to make that judgment of fit, I suppose, by talking to people and going through the interview process. So that's why I came down on client side. It's also a different level of, a different type of problem solving. We talk about requirements, we talk about risk and ensuring value for our customers. in a slightly different way to a consultant project manager, and in a very different way to a contractor on site. So, and with regards to moving abroad, there's a whole nother set of personal and family considerations when doing that, and the jobs are very different out there. But if anybody does want to have a quick chat about the Middle East and contracting consulting, I might be able to point some people in the right direction.
And is there a rank thing in that to be client side, or is it an ownership thing? Is it a personality thing?
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Just in terms of being client side, I'm just trying to understand what the draw was there. I didn't know if your rank played a part in that, if it's the absolute ownership thing of it that drew you to it.
No, I don't think so. I think it's for my particular job, and not speaking for every job in the engineering part of Vantage, but I've got a great freedom to go to different parts of the business at a developer level and work out how we can make our product better for our customers across the region. So I can fly to Berlin if I need to and learn lessons from Berlin. I can go and talk to equipment vendors in France, or I can go and see our sites being built in Italy, and bring all those back to a central location, which sees real change. It changes requirements, it changes processes, and I have a reasonable amount of influence over how things are delivered, which I don't think you get if you're plugged into a process and given a project and said, right, go ahead and just build that, sit on that site and build it for 2 years. Not to say it won't be a fantastic experience for some people. That's why I wanted to go client side.
Right, and are you doing that dad thing of being in the car telling your daughter, kind of, daddy worked on that project, and that project, and that project? Are you at that point yet? Is there enough under your belt?
I do when I walk around London, yeah, some nice buildings out there with my name on it.
Quite right, quite right. So, Michael, to you, one thing you mentioned was the soft landing, and it's to ask, do you advise that demilitarization role before a career start, or going straight into that second chapter, or is it just different for everyone?
So I think it's different for everyone. I think the most important thing is figuring out what you want to do when you grow up, and I still don't know, and so therefore it's trying to find out what your motivators are to then determine where you want to go. So whether your primary focus is family stability or geography or money, let's not be on, let's not kid ourselves here. We want to earn more cash. So that's, once you figured out your motivation, then actually it will begin to steer where you want to go. But sometimes it's really hard. Let's be honest. Most people, leaving the military is a heck of a shock to the system. The civilian world is very different to the military world. Your question about rank, I thought was interesting. Civilians don't care. They genuinely don't care. Interesting, my CEO, who I report direct to, is an ex-wing commander. I try not to hold it against her. But my deputy is an ex-signaler. So my deputy is exceptional and held in high regard because of what he delivers to the business, not because of the fact he left after 3 years as a signaler, never having promoted. Your credibility is what you sell yourself on, not the rank that you held. So it's about conveying that to an employer in a way that they understand to get you to the interview, and then bringing your CV alive during an interview, which all military people can do because we're interesting, makes it easier to get a job if you've targeted the right place.
And is it by design that you've got veterans in your team, or is it just pure talent? Everybody's on a level playing field when they're going through that interview process.
We don't specifically target military personnel, but for example, in the facilities management space, we not just for us but for all data center operators, everything is very tightly controlled on how things are done. But if you've for those who've had to maintain equipment in the military, if you've worked with AESPs, you can work in a data center. It's exactly the same, it's just written in slightly different language.
And you said, as an owner, operator, developer, I think was the term, it's about FM. You employ mechanical engineers to maintain generators, and electrical and chilling engineers on HV systems and security roles. One thing that the ITB review has identified this morning that kind of landed was that industry needs to provide kind of adult apprenticeships, like upskilling and training very, very quickly to allow people from other sectors to either upskill or retrain or retrade. Does your employer provide anything like that? Is somebody able to move into these technical roles that you'll train up?
Across the whole of the industry, trying to find the people with the right science, technology, engineering and maths backgrounds is incredibly difficult. So again, I don't know about Vantage, but we certainly run apprenticeship schemes. We advertise them widely. We did our first. We're still running our first 2 through at the moment in our London sites, and we had 1,500 applicants for those 2 roles. So that's an indication of the demand for people wanting to get into the industry. There are quite a lot of deluded people out there as well that think they're qualified to come and do it, and that's where filtering out is interesting. But the reality is, as an industry, we're desperately short of the people with the right skill set. And actually, as the MOD runs the biggest apprenticeship scheme in the UK, actually most people, if they come to the data center industry, there is a degree of, they've had an apprenticeship, if they've had a technical background. From my side, so bear in mind, I'm FM focused rather than construction focused, but I'm sure it's the same with individuals that have come. If you've got the qualifications, chuck them up front and then colour them in with the CV that follows behind.
Okay, and on that qualification piece, you said quite rightly it's to gain interviews, so establishing the entry requirements which align with the role, it's a business requirement. Should you still apply if you don't have that fundamental PM certificate?
So here's the thing I would say is, I would rather employ someone who's got the right attitude and a couple of gaps than I would employ someone with all the right qualifications but won't fit in my team. So what I would say to anyone on this call, don't rule yourself out, allow the interviewers to do it for you. So if you look at it and go, well, I've only got 8 of the 10 qualifications, flip and apply for the job, because we'll look at it and go, do you know what, we'll give them a punt. If you don't get to the interview, fine, you don't get to the interview, but the reality is you probably will, and if you do, you're then in a position to sell yourself. And as long as you're honest and say, look, do you know what, I haven't, I know I don't have that, but I'm willing to learn. I would much rather take someone that turns up that I just can't work with.
And you, Tom?
So to add to that one, Michael, I definitely agree, and maybe I was a bit too flippant saying my Prince 2 qualification is irrelevant. Maybe it did get me through the door on a couple of, particularly now you get AI chatbots screening people's CVs. Maybe it was something that got me through a first round filter. It may well have done, but certainly I'd take the view there that what's it cost to put someone on Prince 2? $3,000, maybe a bit more. If a company needs you to have that and you've got the experience to go and pass that first time, $3,000 is not going to trouble the scorers anywhere really. If you are missing a box that you think needs to be ticked, then I would encourage people to apply anyway if you think you've got the right experience and skills for the role. And that goes back to networking, because if you are applying to companies that use these automatic filters, you need some way of getting around them, and that is coming to things like this and talking to Michael. Michael's put his friendly TA talent acquisition, we call them now, email in there, and I have one as well that I can share at the end. So, or networking with people like us. So you've seen a job, do you know who I can talk to about this? And that will almost always get you around a filter. And just to loop back on apprenticeships, the Vantage also looking at, we have apprenticeships kicking off this year. We also have interns, and we have internal training qualification as well to develop people through that. I don't think we require a Prince 2 or an APM tick for the project management roles, but we can always find someone to ask if it's helpful. Just a quick plug, actually. I don't know if this is contrary to BuildForce. I think it's actually entirely complementary, but there's an organization called the Infrastructure Masons, iMasons, and they have an armed forces chapter, and they will pay for you to go and do courses. If you're if you apply to Infrastructure Masons, you can get an associate membership for free by proving you were in the armed forces, and they will pay for you to go and do introduction to DC business courses and invite you to networking events and other such things, which is data center specific. So
And
that's
just to clarify, it's
brilliant,
nothing
Tom.
to do
Yeah.
with the Masons. It's an unfortunate title. It came from America. We just inherited it. But it's a really good touch point to get into the industry because, you know, Tom and I and most of the big providers in the UK are sponsors of parts of the iMasons. So, you know, it gives you access to a lot of us through other channels. And we work in the background to try and support the industry despite being competitors because we recognise the skill paucity that we've got and the value that ex-defence personnel will add to the industry.
Just on that ex-defence personnel piece, a question's come in from Jamie about some job adverts are asking explicitly for data centre experience. If you're coming in through that military pathway, are your talent acquisition leads being sensible enough to overlook that through the sifting process, or are they being jobs worths on some of sorry? Yeah.
So I would argue it depends upon the role. You know, if you want to be a data center manager, you're going to need data center experience. If you're pitching yourself in a, you know, if you're going to go and construct data centers, doesn't really matter. But so read the advert and remember, quite often the person that wrote the advert doesn't know the role. So therefore, if you think everything else apart from that experience, just apply for the job. You know, as I said, I go back to the other point, let them filter you out. But what I would say is before you put in your CV, maybe have a think about some of the language you've got within that to try and win the bingo jingo space. That you get the phraseology in there to say you've dealt with, you know, if you've worked on facilities management stuff, that's data center experience, albeit not on a data center. So if you worked on a warship and you've looked after the air handling units on the back of the ship, that'll get you into one of my data centers. So I've got an ex-nuclear submariner that works for me who's never been in a data center in his life, and he's brilliant. I got another guy who's an ex-generator monkey from the Signals, never worked in a data center in his life. He's now a deputy data center manager. So, you know, strip out the language that you think is irrelevant, focus on the bits that you play to your strength, and make sure that's brought to the fore.
Okay, thank you. I know we've got Tony on the call as well. So Tony, any advice or support that you can offer, just please come online. There's some sapper love flying about on the comments as well. So thank you, Derek, for the comment. And again, Tom, thank you for sharing the infrastructure masons. Like, that is exactly what these sessions are about. It's to help and advise and signpost. You're on the other side, so you'll have that intel. So we really appreciate you sharing that. Just a question to both of you. Michael, we'll start with you. Kind of tickled me a little bit when you mentioned don't lie on your CV. It's the kind of, is it embellishing experience? Is it taking credit for your senior's role? Is it what are you seeing as a bit of a trend here?
Let me give you an example that you never know what's going to come and bite you. I had a civilian apply to come and work in one of my data centers, and in there he'd put a specific line that he had, because again we do IT stuff as well. He had installed the Wi-Fi at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I interviewed him, and as I started to scratch away at this, it was blatant that he'd lied. And we got to the point where I stopped the interview and said, right, when I used to come down and visit your office, I never saw you there. Did you install it, or were you involved in the peripheries? Because I was the chief of staff at Sandhurst at the time. At which point the interview fell apart where he admitted he'd lied. Now we moved beyond that point, but you never know who's going to interview you. So embellish and absolutely maybe big yourself up, but don't lie, because you will be caught out and in the most inopportune moments. And it's just dreadful to watch or be on the receiving end of.
And in terms of any stories there, Tom, any experiences you've had?
No, I've not been out long enough to be interviewing myself. Unfortunately, you know, I wasn't caught out.
No. You must be honest. There's professionalism, Tom. So well done you.
But one tip on that is to use the first person, and don't be ashamed to use the first person. It is something that probably doesn't come naturally to military people. It took me a while. I could show you my file of like 600 different variations of my CV, adapted and version controlled and scribbled on by friends and mentors. But you don't have to say, I owned this and spent £600 million myself as a Bakshi major in Army HQ. But you can say, I was part of X program with this much, and this is the role I played in it, and this was the result from my hard work. So there's a line which doesn't come naturally of saying this is the contribution I made and this is what I learned from it, without having to embellish that you were, God's gift to everything that you've ever done.
Okay. Okay. And a question to you both with regards to the interview. We've had some veterans come on here and say that in that interview, if that service leaver is sitting in front of me with that Royal Engineers tie and that Royal Engineers badge and that kind of Royal Engineers presence, and they haven't left the military yet, does that matter to you if they're very much still in that military space? Obviously, being indoctrinated, as you said, for 22 years or 24 years is going to make a difference to them. But anything kind of broadly in that space, Michael, that you would advise? Is it just been themselves?
Do you know what? The interview process is really interesting. If you've got an interview, it costs money. We're not interviewing you because, it'll be a laugh. We're interviewing people because we want to recruit someone. And if you've got through that stage, turn up and be comfortable, and also interview the interviewers. It's a two-way process. It's not just about you getting a job, it's also figuring out if you want to work with these people. You can get a job and then hate it within a week and you've wasted so much time. So, it is actually a dialogue. A good interviewer will try and put the person who's being interviewed at ease. If they're not making you feel comfortable, then the question is, what's it going to be like to work with them? So if you are comfortable turning up, stripy tie, shiny shoes, even if you can't see them, then that's absolutely fine. But don't shout back if you're asked for your service number, because that will probably go down badly. But nonetheless, be as relaxed as you can, but remain professional. And if that's, I've been to interviews in jackets and ties. I've been to interviews in pretty much jeans and t-shirts. Again, understand who you're having an interview with to make sure that you're arriving in the right frame and mindset.
That's brilliant advice, Michael. Thank you. And your own personal experience, Tom, of interviews, the best or worst that you've had?
It is an interesting point, going in what makes you feel comfortable versus what makes you look slightly unusual walking into the office and having that conversation. I would say I went through several rounds of interview with consultancies globally, really, and often that was me sitting in a room or actually going into someone's office in a stripy tie, a dark suit and a white shirt, and that went very well in that industry. That would have looked slightly strange walking into the Vantage office. I still wore a jacket, but I wore an open neck shirt and a jacket. But that is adapting to the culture of the company, and that's part of where you have to decide whether you fit. So if you don't think you can ever be comfortable wearing trainers in the office, then you maybe look at finance. But it's part of an adapting process. I was expecting to have to be wearing shirt and tie in everything I did, and realized quite quickly that wasn't really what made people comfortable, and sort of adapt as you go along. It goes back to my comment in the intro of speaking the language and understanding the area you're going into. And DCs, we are sort of construction, but it lives and breathes very much like a tech industry, and so it's very much more relaxed on the fashion front, particularly. Not that I'm one to give fashion advice to anybody.
I was going to say, is this a trendiest you've ever been, Tom? You got a whole new wardrobe.
Yeah, they keep giving me stuff as well. Where's my Vantage logos?
Looking good.
Yeah, there's mine. There we go. So yeah.
There you go. You're keeping down. You're well and truly demilitarised now. You're on the other side. and just on that point, Tom, work-life balance, being home for your daughter. Did you gain all that upon leaving? Has that all come into fruition?
Yeah, I was already living in London for my wife's work. I was reverse commuting up to the Midlands, which wasn't particularly enjoyable. It was a great job. I loved my final job as sub-unit commander, but that was a lot of time away. I'd been on tour 3 times in 3 years, not full 6-month tours, and nothing particularly dangerous, but a lot of time away. So it's really nice to be at home. My commute is 40 minutes on a tube, which is more or less pleasant depending on the time of day you attempt it, but it's very easy, and I'm home nearly every night. I get a little bit of travel as well. I mentioned some of the sites we're a regional business, so anything in Europe or South Africa. So I get to travel out to sites. I'm usually aim to be away 3 days of a month, so 1 week a month. I'll travel to a site, meet the teams there, have that talk with them, then go back and bring their feedback into how we can do business better. So I really love the balance. It works perfectly for me, being at home nearly every night, and the opportunity for travel.
And just on that, in terms of the team, how did people respond to you when you first started? I mean, did they perceive you as James Bond? Were they intrigued by you? Were they a bit suspicious of you? What was that like? Or do you just not know because it was said behind your back?
I don't know what they thought about me. I arrived into a rapidly growing team structure in a management role that didn't exist before. So I was forming a new team, taking 6 people from other teams or in a larger generic design engineering role, and bringing them into this design integration team with a bit more structure. So it was something new, but I work with Tony Shields is on the call somewhere, and is my line manager. And so people had seen someone make a military transition into that team already. I don't know if they thought, here's another Tony, and whether that's a good thing or not, I think you'll probably ask Tony. But it worked very well. And yeah, I understand it's good for me to have a military line manager, but everybody else in the business, I think, in our HQ, it's only Tony and I who are ex-military, and no one bats an eyelid. People maybe watch you for the first week to see if you've got the skills you said you had on your CV. You're not just a military machine, and you can have some of the soft skills as well. But no, there's really no problem at all, and they're a great team. But I have a little bit of civilian experience as well from my placements. I've seen it before, so I'm not entirely walking off the parade ground and into an office. So,
thank you for that. And to you, Michael, that work-life balance, greatest frustration, what's it all like now?
My job is not a good example. I went to Indonesia 18 months ago for 2 weeks and stayed for 4 months. So I'm not normal. But my teams, absolutely, if they're site-based, they're either on what we call day roles, so literally 8 till 5 days a week, and they have every weekend off, or they're on shift patterns, and depending upon their role, it's normally 4 days, 4 nights, 4 off, plus annual leave as well. So for those individuals, they get to manage their time very well. And certainly the further up the chain you go, that propensity for someone like me, I'm weird because I'm on a plane all over the world all the time, which sounds glamorous. Trust me, it's rubbish. And until you've done it for work a lot, you don't realise how rubbish sitting in airports is. But nonetheless, we will always focus upon ensuring that our people are looked after, because it's so difficult to recruit that you don't want them to walk out because you've asked something that's unreasonable of them. And so therefore, if one of my team comes to me and says, look, you've asked me to go and do X, Y, and Z, but it's my daughter's parents' evening, for example, the instant answer, unless it's life critical, do you know what? Go to your parents. We'll sort that out, and we'll do another day. So there's a very different work-life balance in the civilian world compared to the military, where it's a case of, well, JFDI doesn't matter, you'll sacrifice that. It is very different.
Thank you very much. I know there's been huge requests and notes here in the messages in terms of the roles and opportunities that are available with both employers. So we've stated them, but we'll share them as well with the team. So please get in touch with BuildForce if you need that information. But thank you to Michael and Tom for their incredible contribution today. Big shout out to Tony Shields for his ongoing support. It is greatly appreciated. We've got excellent employers here with Pure and Vantage, both champions of our armed forces. So BuildForce are here to support and guide you as you transition. So please get in touch if you have any questions, and we'll help you take it further. And I'll pass back to Caroline for some final insights.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, guys. That was brilliant. I've certainly learned so much more. And just echoing Angela's thanks to Tony and Tom, and of course, Michael, your support is always greatly appreciated. We hope that you're not too inundated after this virtual career chat. But just the heads up before you all go, because I appreciate we are running slightly over. Our next up in our schedule is next week. We have the team from Balfour Beatty Vinci. They are delivering the West Midlands part of the HS2, but also they have the wider opportunities within Balfour Beatty Vinci and their supply chain. And this is the event to come along to. We're hosting later on in March 27th, their project day at their Kingsbury site, which again is a fantastic day. If you're not booked in, why not? So come and join us next Thursday the 6th, and you will find out much more about this iconic project and what they are delivering and what they're doing in that space. It's going to be prepared to be wowed. When they delivered this 2 years ago, it was our most popular virtual career chat. So look forward to seeing you next week. Have a lovely sunny day. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Michael. It was amazing. Thank you very
guys.
much. We
It was
appreciate
really
that.
good.
Thank you, Caroline.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Tom and Michael.